your own local councils. But as a general question, some, I think, rightly might ask, well, how is it that lawyers might be able to reach different conclusions about the same legal question? And my answer to that in this case has to be that we don't know what our conclusion at McGranche really is going to be, and I think I want to be sure you're aware of that at this point. I could also observe if lawyers didn't have different conclusions about things, we probably wouldn't have any lawsuits, which may or may not be a good thing. But we have done some initial investigation of the requirements for the opinion, the structure of the transaction, and the documents that your local government units will be asked to sign. And I think we see some possibility that there may be a way to work out some of the issues that have been raised by prior council. That may entail possibly changing or discussing, at least with the other lawyers that are involved, bond counsel, underwriters counsel, local counsel, if that's us, who is going to cover what subjects in the respective opinions, who is maybe going to be entitled to rely on some other lawyer's opinion for this purpose, and it may involve discussing what's the provisions of some of the documents themselves. It may involve the kind of disclosure that's being made in the offering document for the bonds as to what the potential investors are being told is the deal and what the risks are that they might be facing if they decide to invest. So what we've proposed is a process. Has everyone gotten our proposed engagement letter? It kind of lays out what so that's really our, I can't tell you what our conclusion is going to be, but we've tried to describe the steps that we would take to arrive at an answer. And I can tell you that bond counsel, underwriters counsel, your agency counsel have not, and we have now scheduled a meeting for early next week to, I think, discuss in a big picture way some of our concerns and some of the ideas that we have for how those might get resolved. So I think we'll know a little more. I'm not sure we'll have an answer, but we may be able to get some feedback on whether our possible solutions could work, and then if they don't, then that's one thing. If they might, then we go to the next step of actually trying to write the opinions and write the documents. And those of you who work with lawyers know that sometimes takes a little while as well. So I'd be happy to answer questions. Yes.
Your estimated cost in there, is it going to go down any because it's going to become dropped out?
It very well could. Yeah, part of what you see there, I know those look like big numbers. Part of what you see there is, pardon me? Yeah. It arose because we recognized that we're representing whatever it is, 10, 11 different governmental units, and so there's a need to meet with each of them, and we understand some of those meetings may be joint, so we might not have 11 separate meetings, but nonetheless, we need to engage directly with your governing bodies and make sure that we understand, and all the members of your governing bodies understand each other about what's happening here, in order to give us a basis for giving our opinion as the opinion that's being requested of us. So part of it, and then we looked at possibly the different governmental units might have different laws that apply to them. For example, county versus city. Possibly some of you are home rule charter cities, and so while there is a great deal of commonality, there are also some differences, and we had to build in some additional time for all those processes and concerns as well. I think I can also say that I think we'll have a pretty good idea of whether, what the probabilities are that we're going to get there well before we get too far down the road.
Your intended meetings with the different entities, is that something that you want to do before you guys give your opinion on the bonds or after you give the opinion on the bonds?
It has to happen before, and in fact, we actually, your local government units have to hire us, and so I think, did I understand that Renville County's Board of Commissioners, so we now have a client, so we can, although we have, somebody wants it, that's the essence of being a lawyer, but we haven't actually had a chance to speak with the Renville County people, but we certainly want to do that. And we need to do that as a condition for even talking to, on any substantive way, bond counsel and underwriters, the other lawyers and the underwriter and so forth. Otherwise, we're just strangers to the deal. So to get back to the point that we want to meet with the local government units, your city councils and so forth as soon as possible. I'm interested to hear that you're having actually meetings already scheduled for the 5th and the 7th of November, and maybe there may be some that possibly we could even meet with before then, so that whoever is interested in engaging our firm, we would be able to do that, and also maybe have some discussion at that time about some of our concerns and get some feedback from council members.
So what would be the process for coordinating that? So, I mean, are you going to let Mark know dates that you'd be available? I mean, if we chose to set special meetings?
Yes, we would, if that's permissible, we'd be happy to work with Mark or whoever's going to do it to, and I think we would make every effort to be available given the circumstances that we find.
Would it make sense then if we put Broughton, Stewart, Buffalo Lake and had some commissioners there, that we could do it at one meeting? Renville County's covered? Oh, I forgot.
How about our group? Is our list? Can't these people represent it?
Well, they have to make a vote. Each council's got to vote to hire.
Right.
We've already got our.
Right. It's the cities that are hiring us.
I think what Doug is saying, Peter, is that you folks go back to your councils and say, while we want to meet with Peter yet, because it's going to be real hard to get all these meetings in before the 5th or the 7th, it just is. We feel we should hire them, and then we'll sit down and meet with them. Now, keep in mind that the legal bill for this is paid for out of the bond proceeds. Right? That is correct, Peter?
It's my understanding, assuming and hopefully that the transaction closes. Yeah,
Correct.
right.
So how does that impact?
Well, you would go back to your meeting on the 5th, and you might not be able, or the 7th, you might not be able to meet. Your council may not have been able to meet with Peter by then, but you would say to your council, we need to hire these guys. We need to pass a motion to hire these guys, and then he'll come down and meet with them.
Okay, so we say we're gonna hire him, why does he even need to come then?
If he wants to come.
Yeah, we feel that we should.
He wants you to know everything that you need to know. He just wants.
Figured it was done, so.
No, he just wants you to understand the process and you to understand what you're getting into so that you make an informed decision when you.
Well, we've already hired him by that point, though.
But he has to give a bond opinion. And part of that bond opinion, you know, I'm not trying to speak for you, but
You're doing very well. Yeah.
That in his mind, he's got to know that all these entities that he represents, they know the deal. That he's comfortable in his mind, that they know the risks, and they know what's going on, and they've had everything explained to him. So when he gives his opinion, which actually is held to a higher level, a higher standard than say Bob, because Bob, you're the one that told me. He's not a bond, Bob's not a bond attorney, that he, in his mind, he knows that everybody knows the deal, and there's no misconceptions.
So having
That's
these
true.
meetings really is,
Important. Because,
Right.
God forbid, something happens down the road and there's a lawsuit, and they go to you as the mayor, you say, "Well, I never heard that. I don't know where he got that," because he wants to make sure that you know the deal. You know all the risks, and you know everything that's going on, to make an informed decision. I think that's important. I think that's very
No, that is important, and that's a good explanation. I think I thought that the city councils and I guess it's only Renville's voted, so I guess it's city councils might not feel comfortable engaging a new lawyer, not having met such a person, and so I wanted to, I'm happy to be there and do what I'm doing here, which is present myself and explain what we propose to do and so forth. But I guess you could hire the law firm without us, actually having been there first, I suppose so.
just always look for a way to save time. and money.
correct. And yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, so you're still gonna meet with them.
Dave?
Part of Joyce's question is, I think, to justify the amount, the big number. The other thing, I don't believe we need this opinion until it's a closing document for the bonds. We don't need it before we sell the bonds, correct?
You
We
don't,
need it before we can close on the bonds.
what I think, if I could, I'm sorry, I keep just answering and I should be. I think before people go to the market and try to sell the bonds, we have a document called the bond purchase agreement. Maybe you've even seen a draft of it circulating, which is the contract, in this case, between Oppenheimer, the bond underwriter, and the issuer, which is your board. That when Oppenheimer goes to the market, sells the bonds, this is before the closing, this is just they're marketing the bonds. The lawyers all want to know what they've signed up for before the bonds are sold. And so we have to have agreement on who's delivering what opinions and what those opinions are going to say before we go to market. In this case, unlike a lot of others, but in this case, other law firms have raised some concerns, and so I think you absolutely have to deal with those and have local counsel, which is what the underwriter is requesting, give an opinion. That all has to be in place and ready to go. Not, you're correct, not signed, but it has to be in place and ready to go before you can sell the bonds, unless the underwriter changes their mind, and I don't think that's likely. Local council opinions are very customary in these kinds of deals.
All right, so maybe to move this along a little bit, so by when would you like to have your work done, meeting with all of the various entities?
Well, I think we'll know more early next week when we meet with the lawyers, but and then we need to also see the new business plan, and that's, you folks are all on the right wavelength. That's what you're going to be approving, basically, when you come back down to it. So I would be hoping in a matter of several weeks, I think, 2 to 3 weeks, but it's kind of a guesstimate at this point.
Perhaps what I could suggest, if I could, is that maybe if next week, if you know more about timelines, that maybe, Mark, you could send an email to all of the city administrators and maybe coordinate that way.
That's an excellent point, Madam Chair. And I'll stress this to Peter and Shannon, one of the big challenges we have is communicating, because there are 12, maybe 13, there may be 12 entities, and it's, we just need to communicate as much as we can. Yes.
Brad?
But prior to meeting with him, we have to have a special council meeting to actually hire their firm. Correct? Question.
Madam Chair, I suppose it could happen at the same meeting. could happen at the same meeting. We could, it's up to you how your council would want to do that, I suppose.
Doug?
So, the week of the, you're saying